Welcome to your own channel, Whispers in Deadlight. New chilling, horror, creepy encounters, ghost stories videos are waiting for you. Please subscribe this channel, so you never miss a moment of the darkness. Now let's begin with story number 1. It was a cold autumn evening when Lucas arrived in the small village of Varel, tucked away in the northern region of Germany. The chill seemed to cut straight through his coat, and the wind whispered through the trees as if the forest itself were alive. The village, barely a dot on the map, was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone's business, if not by name, then certainly by face. Lucas had come from Hamburg, where he'd lived for most of his life, and moved here to escape the memories of his parents' tragic deaths. He was young, restless, and searching for something, though he couldn't say what. A fresh start, maybe. A new chapter. Or perhaps just peace, something his life had been lacking for years. The village was charming, rustic houses with moss-covered roofs, cobblestone streets that led nowhere, and an eerie stillness that seemed to hang in the air. But there was one thing that didn't sit right with Lucas. The locals avoided the old manor that sat on the outskirts of town. Its decaying stone walls and dark windows felt like eyes watching you. It was an imposing presence that made even the bravest souls avoid it after sundown. The stories surrounding the place were varied. Some said it was cursed, others claimed it was haunted by the restless spirits of its original owners, but one thing was certain: no one who had ventured near the manor after dark had ever returned the same. But Lucas wasn't like the others. He wasn't superstitious. He thought it was all just local gossip, something to spook the tourists and keep the villagers entertained. Still, there was a part of him, a small part, that felt a strange pull toward the place. He told himself it was just curiosity, the kind of curiosity that often gets people in trouble. It was the evening when he first heard about the man in the shadows. It was Editha, an elderly woman who ran a small bakery in the village, who warned Lucas. He had stopped in for some bread, and as she wrapped it in paper, she looked him dead in the eyes and said in a whisper, "Don't go near the manor after dark, boy." Lucas was taken aback. "Why? What's the story with it?" he asked, half expecting her to laugh it off. Her gnarled hands stopped folding the paper, and her gaze hardened. "It's not a story. It's a warning. There's a man who walks in the shadows there. He's not alive, and he's not dead. But he's there, waiting for someone to wander too close." Lucas chuckled nervously, trying to brush it off. "Come on, Editha, you're not still buying into that old ghost story, are you?" Her eyes narrowed. "I've lived here long enough to know better. You can choose to ignore it, but you won't ignore him when you see him. And when he comes for you, it's already too late." That night, as Lucas lay in bed, the thought of Editha's words nagged at the back of his mind. Was it just an old woman's superstition? Or was there something more to her warning? He turned the question over and over in his mind, trying to reason it away. But no matter how much he tried, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching him. Something waiting. Lucas spent the next few days settling into the village, getting to know the local people, and trying to ignore the heavy silence that seemed to hover around the manor. But as the days grew shorter and the nights colder, the pull of the manor became too strong. On the 4th night, Lucas decided he would visit the manor. It was late, well past midnight, and the village was completely still. The moon hung high in the sky, casting an eerie light over the landscape. The path that led to the manor was long and winding, lined with overgrown bushes and twisted trees that seemed to reach out for him. Lucas had expected the place to look even more terrifying up close, but the manor seemed quiet, still. It wasn't the haunted, menacing place the villagers had made it out to be. In fact, it looked almost peaceful, like a forgotten relic of the past. But there was something wrong about the air. It was too still, too quiet. The kind of silence that presses down on you, making you feel like you're being suffocated. Lucas stood at the iron gate, staring at the grand building. He could feel his heart pounding in his chest. The chill of the night seemed to intensify the longer he stood there. Then, without warning, a sound echoed through the darkness, soft, faint, but unmistakable. A footstep. Lucas froze. His breath caught in his throat. It was the sound of someone walking. Lucas turned quickly, his heart racing. The path behind him was empty. No one was there. He took a deep breath, trying to calm himself. It was probably just an animal, he told himself. But then, another sound, closer this time. The footsteps. And they were unmistakably human. Lucas spun around again, his eyes scanning the shadows that stretched out across the grounds. His gaze landed on the corner of the manor, where the shadows were the deepest. There, standing just beyond the reach of the moonlight, was a figure. It was a man, or at least it looked like one. Tall, thin, and shrouded in darkness, the figure seemed to be standing perfectly still, as if waiting for something. Lucas felt his stomach churn. "Hello," he called, his voice trembling. "Who's there?" The figure didn't move. Lucas' curiosity outweighed his fear. Slowly, cautiously, he took a step forward, his foot crunching on the gravel. The figure remained silent, motionless. Another step. And then the figure stepped forward, its movement so swift, so unnatural, that Lucas didn't even have time to react. Before he could blink, the figure was standing right in front of him. It was a man, yes, but there was something off about him. His face was pale, ashen, and his eyes were dark, so dark they seemed to absorb all light. There was no reflection in his eyes, no soul. Lucas stepped back, his heart racing, but the figure didn't move. It just stood there, watching him. "Who are you?" Lucas managed to ask, his voice barely a whisper. The figure tilted its head, as if contemplating the question. Then, it spoke in a voice that sent shivers down Lucas' spine. "I am the one who walks in the shadows." Lucas couldn't move. He felt paralyzed, his body refusing to listen to his mind's frantic command to run. The figure raised its hand, and for a moment, Lucas thought it might reach out and touch him. But then, the figure simply stepped back into the darkness, vanishing as suddenly as it had appeared. Lucas blinked, his mind struggling to catch up with what had just happened. He didn't know how long he stood there, staring into the darkness, but eventually, his legs regained control, and he bolted from the manor, running as fast as he could back to the village. His breath came in ragged gasps as he ran, the sound of his own footsteps echoing in the cold night. But as he neared the village, he felt an overwhelming sensation. Something was following him. He dared not look back. Lucas returned to his room, his heart still pounding in his chest. He couldn't sleep. His mind raced with what had happened, and no matter how many times he tried to reason it away, he knew deep down that something had been wrong with that figure. It wasn't human. The next morning, as the sun rose over the village, Lucas felt a strange calm settle over him. He decided he wouldn't go back to the manor. It was over. He had seen the thing that had been haunting the village, and now he could leave it behind. But as he walked through the village square, a strange feeling washed over him. He wasn't alone. There was something watching him. He turned, but no one was there. Just the usual villagers, going about their business. Yet, the feeling didn't go away. That evening, the same feeling returned. The air grew thick with tension, and Lucas found himself once again standing at the edge of the manor, staring into the shadows. The man who walked in the shadows. Lucas couldn't ignore the pull any longer. Despite the terror that gripped him, despite the warnings from the villagers and the fear in his own gut, something about the manor still called to him. It was as if the place had some dark, magnetic force that drew him in. That evening, the village was especially quiet, with the usual chatter of people and the rustling of leaves replaced by an unnatural stillness. The sky hung heavy with dark clouds, and a damp mist crept along the ground, wrapping the village in an eerie fog. Lucas stood at the edge of the village, staring down the long, narrow path that led to the manor. For a moment, he hesitated. His mind screamed at him to turn back, to go home and forget this madness. But the strange urge to return, to confront what he had seen, was too strong. He walked down the path, each step heavier than the last, until the dark outline of the manor emerged from the fog. The wind howled, shaking the trees and causing the branches to creak ominously. Lucas shivered but pressed on. As he neared the gate, he heard it again. Footsteps. But this time, they weren't behind him. They were coming from inside the manor. His heart skipped a beat. The footsteps were slow, deliberate, like someone, or something, was pacing back and forth. Lucas's breathing quickened. He was close now, closer than he had ever been before. But fear gripped his chest, and he hesitated. Was he making a mistake? Should he turn back? Before he could answer himself, a voice, soft but clear, whispered through the fog. Lucas. It was his name. But it wasn't a voice he recognized. It was smooth, cold, and filled with an unnatural calm. The figure stepped out of the shadows. The same tall, thin man. He stood motionless, as if he had been waiting for Lucas, his face hidden in the darkness but his eyes gleaming like black pits. I've been waiting for you, the figure said, its voice carrying a strange weight, a sense of inevitability. Lucas stumbled back, panic flooding his system. He had to run. But his legs wouldn't move. He was frozen in place, held captive by the figure's presence. The man took a step forward. Lucas's breath hitched. The figure was closer than ever, and in that moment, Lucas could feel it. This wasn't just a man. This thing, this entity, was beyond human. It was something ancient, something that had lived in the shadows for far longer than anyone in the village could imagine. What do you want from me? Lucas finally managed to croak, his voice shaky. The man smiled, or at least, Lucas thought it was a smile. The expression stretched across his face like a grotesque mask. I don't want anything, Lucas. But you've already crossed the line. You're already here. The wind howled louder, as if it too were urging Lucas to turn and run. But his legs still wouldn't move. He felt paralyzed, a prisoner to the man, or whatever it was before him. I don't understand, Lucas whispered. What do you mean I'm here? The figure stepped closer still, until he was inches from Lucas's face. His breath, if he even breathed, smelled like rot and decay. This place, this manor, the figure began, his voice low and hypnotic, was built upon a pact, Lucas. A pact with the shadows. We made a bargain with what lies beneath this world, and it requires payment. Lucas's heart thudded painfully in his chest. What kind of pact? He asked, though he feared the answer. The price of this land was blood. The land you stand on belongs to the shadows now, as does the life of anyone who dares to come too close. And you, the figure leaned forward, its voice becoming a raspy whisper, are the one who's come too close. Lucas felt a chill run down his spine. Something clicked in his mind. The shadows, the eerie silence of the place, the strange, unexplainable pull he had felt toward the manor. It was all part of this dark bargain. This place wasn't just haunted. It was a trap, designed to lure in those foolish enough to come. The shadows claim what they are owed, the figure continued. And you, Lucas, are the next payment. Lucas's mind raced. He had to do something. He had to break free. But how? How could he escape whatever hold this thing had over him? You're not human, Lucas said, his voice trembling. What are you? The figure's eyes gleamed, and his lips twisted into a wicked grin. I am the keeper of the shadows. I am their will made flesh. And now, you will be a part of them. The ground beneath Lucas's feet seemed to shift. The shadows around him grew darker, swirling like a vortex, pulling at the edges of his vision. He could feel them closing in, creeping closer, tightening around him like a noose. But then, a distant sound broke through the oppressive silence, the sound of footsteps, hurried and frantic. Lucas's head snapped toward the source of the noise. Someone was coming. The figure turned its head slowly, its attention momentarily distracted by the approaching footsteps. Lucas saw his chance. With every ounce of strength he could muster, he pushed himself backward, breaking free from the figure's grip. The world spun as he stumbled, his legs finally responding to his frantic need to run. He didn't know where he was going, but he couldn't stay here. Not with that thing. Not with whatever it was that had claimed the manor as its home. Just as he turned to flee, a figure appeared in the fog. It was Wolfgang, the old man the villagers had told him about, the one who knew the truth about the manor, the one who had tried to stop the figure all these years. Lucas! Wolfgang's voice cut through the mist, filled with urgency. Get away from it! Lucas didn't hesitate. He ran toward Wolfgang, who was holding something in his hand, a long, silver cross, glowing faintly in the darkness. The figure hissed, its eyes narrowing as it turned back toward Lucas and Wolfgang. No one escapes, it growled, its voice deep and hollow. Wolfgang raised the cross, and in an instant, a blinding light erupted from it, casting the shadows away like a burst of sunlight. The figure screamed, a sound so shrill and unnatural that Lucas's ears ached. The shadows around them recoiled, as if burned by the light, and the figure staggered back, fading into the darkness. Wolfgang turned to Lucas. You're lucky I came when I did. That thing is ancient. It's tied to this place, to the land itself. You need to leave, Lucas. You cannot stay here. Lucas, still trembling, nodded. I don't understand. What was that thing? Why was it after me? Wolfgang sighed deeply, lowering the cross. It's a shadow. A creature of darkness, born of an ancient pact made long ago. It collects souls. And now it wants yours. But I won't let that happen. Not while I'm here. Lucas swallowed hard, his thoughts a blur. What happens now? Wolfgang looked grim. Now, we get you out of here. And we make sure it never comes back. The fog thickened around them as they hurried away from the manor, the ground beneath their feet cold and slippery. The air was heavy with the weight of the events that had just transpired, and Lucas couldn't help but glance over his shoulder every few steps. Was the figure still watching? Waiting for the right moment to strike again? Wolfgang didn't speak for a long time, but Lucas could feel the tension in the air, thick and suffocating. Finally, after what felt like hours of walking in silence, they reached the edge of the village. Wolfgang stopped and turned to Lucas. You're safe now. For tonight. But that thing will not forget you. It will come again. Lucas nodded, his heart still racing. How do I stop it? Wolfgang looked at him with a strange, sad expression. You don't. No one does. But you can leave. You can leave this place behind and never return. That's the only way to survive. Lucas looked back at the manor one last time, the silhouette of the house standing like a dark sentinel against the night sky. And for the first time, Lucas understood. He had crossed into a world he didn't belong to. And now, all he could do was run. The man who walked in the shadows. Lucas couldn't shake the feeling that something was following him. It wasn't just the manor. It wasn't just the shadows. It was something deeper. The fear had taken root inside him, gnawing at his mind even after Wolfgang had helped him escape the manor. He had no idea how he would ever shake the sense of dread that lingered around him, like a cold fog that never quite lifted. As they reached the edge of the village, Wolfgang turned to him with a somber expression. His once firm grip on the silver cross had relaxed, but the old man's face was still etched with concern. You must leave this place, Wolfgang repeated, his voice low and heavy with warning. That creature, that thing, it will never let you go. Once you've been marked, there is no escaping the shadows. Lucas looked down at the ground, his mind spinning. He couldn't just leave, he had nowhere else to go. This village, this place, had already become his home. But there was something about Wolfgang's words, something in the old man's eyes, that made him pause. Could he leave this place? Could he truly escape the horrors of the manor? The shadows? And if he did, would it ever be enough? I can't just leave, Lucas said softly, his voice shaking. Where would I go? I have nothing left. Nothing but this. He gestured to the manor behind them. And the fear. Wolfgang looked at him, his eyes narrowing in understanding. You have a choice, he said. But if you stay, the price will be high. The fog thickened again, the air pressing down on Lucas's chest. He felt suffocated, trapped between his past and the terror that had claimed his future. "There's one more thing you need to know," Wolfgang continued, his voice quieter now, as though what he was about to say was a secret meant only for Lucas. "The shadows can be bargained with, but not in the way you think. If you want to escape, truly escape, you must break the pact. You must sever the bond." Lucas's eyes widened. "How do I do that? How do I break it?" Wolfgang shook his head. "You can't do it alone. There's a ritual, but it's dangerous, and it will cost you more than you can imagine. The shadow that walks the manor is not just a creature. It is the embodiment of a promise made by the original owner of this land. And it will not let you go unless it is paid in full." Lucas felt the weight of those words sink in, and a cold, bitter taste rose in his throat. "And if I don't do anything, then it will come for you," Wolfgang said. "It will take you, and you will be trapped in its world forever, lost to the shadows." The wind howled through the trees, and Lucas felt a shiver run down his spine. The decision was hanging in front of him like a jagged cliff. One wrong step, and he would fall into an abyss that he could never return from. He didn't know what to do. The night stretched on as Lucas stood there, the weight of Wolfgang's words pressing down on him. The village was still, its streets empty and quiet, as if the entire world were holding its breath. He looked back at the manor, the dark silhouette looming in the distance, like a shadow that refused to fade. He could feel it watching him, waiting. But as he turned back toward Wolfgang, something changed inside him. Fear still gripped him, but there was something else too. A growing sense of resolve. Maybe it was the terror, maybe it was the desire to reclaim control over his life, or maybe it was the simple need to know the truth. Whatever it was, Lucas knew he couldn't run anymore. "I'll do it," he said, his voice steadier than he felt. "I'll break the pact." Wolfgang's eyes darkened with an emotion Lucas couldn't quite place. "Are you sure? It's not just your life that will be affected. The shadows will come for you, yes, but they'll come for everything you care about, too. The village, the people." Lucas felt a cold pit open in his stomach. He had known this was coming. He had known that if he stayed, he would put everyone in danger. But the thought of running again, of leaving the people he had just begun to care for, was unbearable. The fear that had gripped him for days was now being replaced by something else, a kind of quiet determination. "I don't care," Lucas said, his voice firm. "I won't let it destroy everything. I won't be its victim." Wolfgang nodded slowly, as if he had expected Lucas to say this all along. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small, weathered book. It was old, the pages yellowed with age, but something about it felt important. "This is the key," Wolfgang said, handing it to Lucas. "The ritual is in here. But you must be careful. It's not just about words or incantations. The shadows feed on fear, on doubt. You must be strong. If you falter, if you hesitate for even a moment, the shadows will consume you." Lucas took the book from Wolfgang's hands, feeling its weight. It was heavier than he expected, as if it were carrying the burden of centuries of secrets. He flipped it open to the first page, where the ritual was written in a language that made his head spin. "This is it," Lucas whispered. "This is the only way." Wolfgang stepped back, his face shadowed with concern. "I'll help you prepare, but you must understand. Once you begin, there is no turning back." Lucas nodded. He didn't have a choice anymore. The shadows had already found him. They had already claimed part of him. And if this was the only way to break free, then he would face whatever consequences came with it. He looked up at the manor, its dark windows like eyes staring back at him. The figure, the man who walked in the shadows, was still there, waiting for him. And Lucas knew that once he began the ritual, there would be no turning back. He took a deep breath, closing his eyes for a moment, and then turned to Wolfgang. "Let's do it." The fog seemed to grow thicker as they walked toward the manor. The cold crept back into Lucas's bones, but he ignored it. He had made his decision. He wasn't running anymore. He wasn't going to be a victim. And tonight, he would either break the pact, or be lost to the shadows forever.